Well, but is there a precedent? And this tells us that it couldn't have been a controlled demolition because it didn't start at the bottom, right? That's where most controlled demolitions start with buildings. Let's take a look and see if there's another way to do it.
The words of a senior blaster.
We blow the basement, all the columns in the basement. Then we crack it up at the top to get it started. We go every other floor all the way down. Every explosive has a timer on it. That's why it's controlled. When the columns go, each floor goes down and impacts the one below and keeps going.
Marc Loiseau is president of a company called Controlled Demolition.
You don't have to go to the top floor. You can go almost anywhere in the structure, and given the right circumstances, you can release all of that stored energy, converting it into what is called kinetic energy. That's energy in motion, and that's what brings the building down.
Well, here's a 3-story top-down controlled demolition. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3. Now, these are high-energy explosives, C4 and RDX, very loud booms and very visible flashes. Perhaps the reason thermite was used is because they don't have as loud of these explosions like these high-energy explosives. And they don't have the flashes that these do either. Here's a 20-story middle-down controlled demolition. You can start demolitions from wherever you would like. Let's look at the North Tower now. What I want to point out to you is that you're going to see some explosions up at the top of the building, curiously enough. And what's going to happen is this entire section is going to telescope such that half of it, its upper half, is destroyed before there's any movement from the jet plane impacts down. Let's take a look. Here's the first evidence of explosion, and then over here, and then the collapsing. Of course, the violent clouds which are emerging even prior to the collapse. We're going to take a close-up look after this second look. A new fuel source, which very well might be jet fuel that wasn't burned, it's getting new oxygen. Let's take a look now closer up. Right away, we're seeing clouds forming up here. Well, wait, the collapse is supposed to be just down here. But we have asymmetrical damage to this building, right? The plane went in one side, and yet this complete symmetrical collapse, we'll use in quotes from now on, and let's keep going.
Unexpected to
And one
many
more
of us
time.
in terms of how swiftly
Belts, just like the firemen saw, all the way around the building.
they came down.
The antenna falls about 12
Was
meters
unexpected to many of
first,
us in terms of
before
how
anything
swiftly it
else falls,
happened.
indicating core column damage first, not trusses pulling away from the perimeter columns. Now take a look at this from the same tower from the bottom, noting the violence underneath the mushroom cloud. The collapse is supposed to be occurring way up here, but down below, as you'll see in this second run, incredible quantities of squibs, explosions bursting out. And on the third time, I'd like to direct your attention to this racing series of explosions down the right side in the corner of this building. About 40 stories below the collapsing building. It gets painfully obvious after a while, doesn't it?
The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the
Note these multiple nodes of these independent explosions.
old demolition,
It's a little different than the North
these
Tower,
old buildings, it folded down on
but it's still incredibly
and it
the
is not
same
there anymore.
after a while, after all of these explosions developed. Do we have a straight-down symmetrical progression of collapse outside the footprint? We had a 207-foot wide building. FEMA tells us, and you can see in this document, that we have a 1,200-foot debris field, equidistant around each tower. Asymmetrical damage, symmetrical distribution, all through the site, in fact, and beyond. Do we have squibs, or these mistimed explosions? Some believe that these might be appropriately timed explosions. Whatever.
In all the videos of the collapses, explosions can be seen bursting from the building 20 to 30 stories below the demolition wave. Here, 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 and here.
Now, NIST tells us that these are puffs of air being produced by the collapsing building pushing air down the hoistway like a piston. It's got to come out somewhere, right? Well, first of all, these are not puffs of air. They're pulverized building materials. And they occur at 160 to 200 feet, some of them, per second. These velocities are propelled by explosives. 20, 40, and 60 stories below. How can the piston be producing all of that? And in fact, there are these focalized ejections that occur halfway between the corners of the building. Also, say this was the open office space, right, 60 feet long. The elevator hoistway's over here. The piston's going to shove the air into this room. It's going to fill the room fairly uniformly with air pressure before it breaks any windows, right? And then it might break several, but not these highly focalized, pinpoint accurate, geometrically precise, violent ejections. No, it's extremely unlikely. But let's look at a couple of them here.
As the South Tower begins to explode, we track two squibs near the bottom of the frame. They shoot out quickly at first, then slow and merge in with the rest of the dust cloud. Using the first few data points, we see the first squib shoots out at 44.98 meters per second, or about 100 miles per hour. Doing the same for the second squib, we get a speed of 56.3 meters per second, which works out closer to 126 miles per hour.
126 miles per hour of almost instant ejection velocity? Does fire create that? Do we have a near free fall pace through the path of greatest resistance? Let's take a look.
Galileo's law of falling bodies calculates the time in which an object will travel a certain distance in complete freefall. Distance, d, equals 16.8 times time in seconds squared. The South Tower was 1,362 feet tall. 1362 equals 16.08 times 84.7, or 9.2 seconds. The Twin Towers came down in nearly free-fall speed.
What are we talking about here? Let's just try to put this in perspective with this story problem. We have a 15-story building which we hold with this crane over 95 stories of nothing but air. No resistance, right? Just air resistance. Next to it, another 15-story building held over a 95-story building with, say, 80,000 tons of structural steel in it. Now we're going to pull the lever on these cranes and drop them both at once. I brought a 95-story building with me today. And we're going to just test this theory of NIST's. I've got two 15-story buildings. We've got 80,000 tons of structural steel in this one right here. And we got air resistance here. So let's try it, okay? We'll put them both up here. We'll even give a little bit of impact load too, okay? Ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh my God, the one without any resistance under it hit the ground first at virtually free fall speed. This doesn't take much, does it? What happened over here? The building above it met resistance. Through the energy of deformation, it came to a halt. In fact, you'll find on our website, ae911truth.org, that Ken Cutler and Gordon Ross produced these papers, and they show and calculate that, in fact, the building's downward momentum would have been almost immediately arrested. That where is the 15-story building that was driving this building down to the ground at free fall speed? In the first 2 seconds, you saw it reduce half of its mass. It was blown outside. It couldn't have been used to influence the downward progression of the building. In the next 2 seconds, after 4 seconds totally, it's destroyed itself. There's nothing crushing the building. It's tearing itself apart at free fall speed.